Greetings, this is Mark with Unite, and let's do a quick history of data integration and why this matters. Because we often herald in advances with compute and memory and storage, but nobody really wants to talk about how we should go about integrating our systems. Because for nearly every organization, this has been a sore spot, since it's really hard to get a consensus on what a comprehensive data integration strategy should look like. And integrating the systems properly is just as important, if not more important, than fast processors, denser memory, or cheaper storage. Now, let's remember these next two slides. And also, when I say source systems, I'm talking about the databases and your ERPs and your supply chain data and data available through web services, maybe like with a digital marketing platform or something like that. And companies really struggle with, do we try to take on an initiative that integrates all of our important source systems with, say, like a master data management or MDM initiative, or do we continue to implement each integration as a separate point-to-point integration, like using a CSV file transfer once a night or once a week, once a quarter, or maybe like an ETL job where we're extracting data from one or more source systems, transforming it, and then loading it typically into a data warehouse so other business units can consume that data. So to get our heads around this, we'll take a quick trip down data integration memory lane, and this is not going to be a deep dive on data integration history, but we'll just be water skiing across the surface. So in the beginning, let's start from the very beginning. Master records were held in file cabinets that were often under lock and key or in a room under lock and key, guarded by a company VIP like her that you had to get through to get to that data. And at some point, one of the divisions made a business case for a computer and entered these master records from the file cabinet into a mainframe or a mini computer. And soon other divisions followed suit, so there were many of these computers. And data was transferred between them using mag tape or a disk pack. And then soon networking protocols come on the scene, but these were generally proprietary, so every vendor had their own proprietary networking protocols. And then in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan increases defense spending, and some forward thinkers at the General Accounting Office and the Department of Defense started to mandate that we use TCP/IP for any kind of compute bids on any of these government projects. And TCP/IP had been around for 20 years, but now the Department of Defense and the universities really start to adopt it. And this means that different vendors can now integrate more easily. They can all sit on the same wire and they can transfer files between each other. And even vendors like Sun Microsystems would bundle TCP/IP on their desktops and their servers, and they even included a network file system that became a standard, so it became really easy to share information. And then all these different TCP/IP networks come together to form the core of the internet today. And then Tim Berners-Lee takes this concept developed by Ted Nelson in the 60s of being able to select some text and open up a new file, the hyperlink, and he created an addressing scheme for the internet so we can now address files on the internet. And I asked to remember those first two slides of do we integrate everything or with those phones or do point-to-point integrations. This slide's also really important too. We want to remember this one because web crawlers start indexing the web. Now, simultaneously, we just talked about the internet. Now we're talking about the intranet. Enterprise distributed architectures shift to cloud and mobility. And the whole idea is we want to leverage distributed computing, but we also want to start trying to capture and store everything in cheap storage. Because companies see this need to become data-driven. And when we say data-driven, what we mean is we're trying to take as much guesswork out of our decision-making process as possible and use the data at our fingertips. So all of the enterprise data needs to be made available to the decision makers. But going back to slides 1 and 2, typically there isn't a comprehensive data integration strategy. And so now these efficiencies and revenue opportunities are being lost and affecting the bottom line because decision makers don't have all the data, and sometimes what they do have isn't timely enough because most of the integrations are done in batch. They're done once a week, maybe once a night. And then you have your decision makers and analysts that start asking, why can't we leverage our data in the enterprise like Google's PageRank crawlers leverage the data on the internet? And enter in data graph technologies. Now, related terms are data fabrics, data meshes, neural networks, but specifically what I'm talking about here are graph databases. And so how does the enterprise leverage them? And again, everyone is talking about how fast compute is and how cheap memory and storage are, but most organizations don't have clear requirements on how they're supposed to integrate their systems. But with data unification and graph technologies, the data integration endgame is finally in sight. So this is going to remove all this confusion that has been hanging over the heads of IT leaders at organizations. Before it was, how do we go about integrating these things? How can we get a consensus? Now it's clear. So there's been, and one more point, that there's a lot of solutions claiming they help you become data-driven. But unless the data is unified, your decision makers won't have the most accurate data they need, so they won't be able to make the best possible decisions. So what do we mean when we say unified? The first step is that we want to define our key source systems. So these disks down here represent source systems. These could be your ERPs, CRMs, digital marketing platforms, databases with employee data, etc. And so now what does the Unite data unification platform do? The first thing that it does is that it can detect changes in these source systems in real time and publish it out to other systems that are subscribing to the changes. And it's really important to understand that the data is federated, meaning Unite is not a centralized MDM platform that's holding all this data. It just has the metadata on where the records exist. So where does the employee Jane Doe's records exist in these various systems? Now, when a change is detected, so let's say a new record appears here in this database, it gets published up to Unite, and Unite then publishes that change out, but it applies governance first to that change. So it it consults some metadata about what systems have permission to that data, and then publishes that data out. And also these other systems can subscribe. They can choose what they want to subscribe to. So maybe a system is publishing data for me, but perhaps I don't want to subscribe to it. And all of this is done in real time, and it can be done down to the field level. We have other presentations and demonstrations on our website. I'll give the link at the end of this presentation. Unite also handles deduplication, so we don't want to merge records together that don't belong together. So if we have two customers by the name of Betty Smith, we want to make sure that each record is kept unique. So there's some very sophisticated matching and merging algorithms. So the metadata is able to handle keeping records separate like this for the entire enterprise. We also want to log these changes. So when a record's created here, say in this source system, we want to log that. And if it gets published out to other systems, we want to log what systems it got published out to. If a record's updated, where did that record get updated? Where did those updates go? If a record's deleted, where did that record get deleted? And what other systems also subscribe to that delete and deleted the records from their systems? So, and Unite doesn't keep the data for the lineage, it just keeps the event. So this is really important for GDPR and when we're doing data privacy audits. So a consumer's right to be forgotten has to be honored. We need to show we know where their records are being created, we know where they're getting copied to, and we know how to delete them properly. And now when we're talking about data here in these source systems, we're talking about all the data that matters in the enterprise, like sales data, customer data, accounting data, supply chains, inventory levels. And this data is typically spread across the enterprise. Now we can add data graphs to the enterprise, and the data integration or data unification endgame is now in sight. And so when we add a data graph to a unified data platform like this, a data unification platform, we have what's called the data fabric. And so as these changes are occurring and being fed into Unite from these source systems, they can also feed the data graph. And then there's some systems maybe that don't need to be unified with other systems, and they can just directly feed the data graph. And then we have our AI and our ML and our analytics and also data scientists and data analysts doing queries that are building relationships between all of this data. And this is what we talk about with the resulting data fabric. And also we can mine our unstructured data and then build even stronger relationships with that data as well. And then what happens is just like with Google PageRank or with Facebook and LinkedIn, that these relationships become just as valuable as the data itself. And perhaps it's best to illustrate the importance of getting real-time data into the data graph with an example. And let's say we have a Japanese company that has hundreds of systems, and maybe some of them are integrated point to point, but clearly not all systems are integrated with each other, and most of these integrations are done in batch. And let's say there's a snowstorm in Tokyo that has flights delayed for several hours. And then so how is this Tokyo company going to ship product that needs to be in several locations around the world tomorrow? The decision makers need all of the supply chain and logistics data, weather data, flight traffic data. They need all this data in their data graph right now so they can make these decisions right away. And one other point about data unification is that it brings all these features together in single pane views or under a single pane of glass, sometimes we hear people say, where the data governance and the data lineage, this enterprise-wide deduplication, also data virtualization, where we can get the data through an API, and Unite will go out and retrieve that data and assemble it in real time and deliver it back. But and it'll bring all of these together in single pane views, so you're not having to deal with countless data integrations. Maybe if we have to apply some new data privacy rules because there's maybe some new laws. Maybe this Japanese company is now there's a lot of business in Vietnam, and there's some new data privacy laws. They don't want to have to go to all these different data integrations and make changes. They want to be able to go to a single dashboard and control the flow of data going between the different systems. So the whole point of this presentation is to underscore how enterprises have been eagerly consuming the advances in processor, memory, and storage, but doing so without a comprehensive plan for integrating these resources because the requirements for data integration have never been clear. And if you think back to those first two slides in the presentation, do we integrate everything with an MDM solution or keep asking our valuable IT staff to build, configure, and maintain point-to-point integrations for individual business cases? But now the data integration and endgame is clear. We want to unify our data so we can send real-time data into the data graph so that the decision makers have the data they need to make their organizations more successful. So thank you very much for listening. If you want to see some demonstrations of the product or get more information, go to unite.us, articles and videos, or contact us at sales@unite.us. Thank you very much.